Hi everybody, this is Dr. Paul Terrio, and I'm going to do a presentation on blockages to healing. This has been a very important part of my practice for the last couple of years now, and I get lots of questions about it, so whenever I find myself answering the same question over and over and over again with multiple patients, I always do a video about it. So I decided to do one for this, and I hope you enjoy. So, you all know me. I'm a naturopathic doctor. I think naturopathic medicine is wonderful, and it is one of the best systems of medicine the planet has known. We and me personally get very good results in a large variety of acute and chronic conditions. Acute conditions being things that are more limited in time, infectious diseases, acute injuries for pain, and so forth, things like that. Chronic conditions being more long-term issues like diabetes, um, cancer, digestive problems, immune issues, and so forth. But the interesting thing that I've noticed over the time of my practice, I'm right now it is late June 2016, so I've been in practice 5.5 years. I've noticed that not all patients respond equally to our therapies. Some patients, you give them a homeopathic and change their diet, and they are running from the most, dire conditions. Other patients, you throw the book at them, and they still aren't recovering. And this observation led me to determine, or to at least attempt to determine, why this was so. If any of you don't know, this is Father Sebastian Kneipp. He was a priest in Europe in the 19th century, and he basically used some herbs, some dietary changes, and a hydrotherapy, and he was able to cure thousands and thousands and thousands of people. He was one of the most famous men in the world um, because of the renown for his healing abilities. So he did this all with very, very simple methods. He did amazing things on the mostly peasants of the 19th century in Europe. His like we as today's naturopathic doctors probably do not get the same good results. We get good results, but not the same as not like the miraculous ones we hear from his case reports. The old school nature cure methods have been found to be less dramatic in their effect over time. Try doing the same thing as Father Sebastian Kneipp and you'll get people better, but not to the same extent, not quite so dramatically. You won't get what we call healing crises in the same degree. Healing crises, for those of you who don't know, are basically just when your body starts clearing out toxins and activating its function really quickly, and quite often people will feel an acute illness happening. Um, Generally, the difference between a healing crisis and a true, acute illness is that people feel quite a bit better after a healing crisis. They'll, for instance, someone with diarrhea will get, or someone who has, say, irritable bowel syndrome, will treat them and they'll feel better and better and better, and then they'll get an attack of diarrhea that lasts for 2 days, and then the irritable bowel syndrome is gone. Something like that. So we've also found that homeopathic medicines need to be much more specific, and this is an interesting observation that's held up in North America and Europe over the last several decades. Previously, you could get a general remedy, like a remedy that was quite close, and get a good result. Nowadays, quite often you need to find a very, 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 very exact remedy to get the same results that the old masters that Kent and Herring used to have. And one specific example of this is Dr. Otis G. Carroll. So Dr. Carroll was a naturopathic doc. Well, we'd call him a naturopathic doctor now. The regulation in his time in the 20th century was kind of complicated, but he was a naturopathic doctor, and he needed about double the amount of treatments per person to achieve a healing crisis after World War II. So something happened during the war, the exposure to chemicals, the Green Revolution, everything that really, really changed decreased the body's ability to heal and self-regulate, and that number has gone up since then. The big question is, of course, why? Human biology does not shift that quickly. We are the same people we were a century ago, essentially speaking. And as well, over the last maybe 150 years, we've undergone an evolution or a revolution in public health. Like sinks in bathrooms, toilets. Like it sounds silly, but these are really big things. Like, and they're very important for doing this. Health inspections, health inspectors, food safety. Our health and our public hygiene, or our public hygiene, sorry, not our health, but our public hygiene and our public health and our like food safety and everything is better than ever in human history. Why is it that our health in general as a population is declining and we're not responding as well to just allopathic medicine has a few answers to this. They're mostly theoretical. One of them is that humans kind of previously we're living longer and so forth, like we're living longer than we did in the last century, but that we're no longer dying of infectious disease. So our bodies were just kind of badly designed to begin with, and now kind of the faults are playing themselves out now that we have a longer lifespan. We're not dying in our 30s of typhoid or cholera or what have you. I do not support this. If you've seen my talk on living well through retirement, you know that historically a large number of cultures have lived very long lives, longer than we have in this society, with very high levels of functionality and without these chronic health problems and without this lack of responsiveness to natural therapies. So I don't like that. Just does not stand up to the historical context we know for human, from anthropology. Second of which is that basically acute diseases were weeding out weaker individuals. And so basically unhealthy individuals live to adulthood and become chronically adult or chronically ill adults. And so we're just kind of genetically weakening ourselves by not having, weaker individuals weeded out. This, in addition to being like vague, it reminds me of like social Darwinism from the 1920s, which eventually, kind of influenced Nazism and so forth. I think it's pretty nasty. But it also ignores both epigenetics, which is a very extensive topic and we're not going to get into here, and the timeline. We would not have such a radical increase in genetic frequency of chronic illness in 150 years. Like we just like to have such a huge increase, and particularly over the last 20 years, it like genetics does not work that quickly. There's also kind of the idea that in these circles that naturopathic therapies never worked in the first place, that they are placebos and so forth, ignoring kind of the statistical records. There's some homeopaths in particular were excellent about keeping great statistics over their treatments. So there's a very good book called The Logic of Figures, where they compare homeopathic treatment, no treatment, and allopathic treatment of a large number of infectious diseases in thousands and thousands of cases. That should be enough to disprove the placebo hypothesis, because homeopathic and other naturopathic therapies consistently do better than expectant treatment, which is no treatment. So that is not really one ever. So we're kind of left with so these answers just really aren't adequate. So I do have a couple of suggestions. They are, I suspect that over the last century we've undergone a profound suppression of acute disease, and that acute disease serves as kind of both exercise for our immune systems and as a way for our bodies to discharge long-term toxicity. How many of us, the first sign of a cold, will take an anti-inflammatory or cough syrup or something to stop that discharge from happening? So that generally can be a very profoundly difficult process, or profoundly damaging process to the body. I have many cancer patients who, and it's one of the very common things in cancer patients, where they will report that they do not ever get sick. And one of the best things you can expect from cancer patients, or from a cancer patient who's doing that and recovering, is that they'll start to get acute diseases. Not like crazy pneumonias, their immune system aren't working diseases like many people do get during chemo and so forth. Those need to be treated usually conventionally or through some pretty intense naturopathic therapies, but more like the patient will start reporting, everyone got a cold and I never get colds when everyone else gets a cold, but I got a cold this time. Things like that are actually very good signs. Um, Second thing, so that's number one, this profound suppression of acute disease. It really renders the organism it renders it much more difficult for it to respond. The second of which is the buildup of epigenetic issues over time. The stereotypical example of this is in Pottinger's cats. So Pottinger's cats was an experiment run by Pottinger, and he fed two different groups of cats. He fed one of them like a natural, healthy diet with meat and milk, and he fed the other one pretty much a standard American diet with tons of sugar and processed foods. The first generation, there wasn't much difference in the health or physical makeup of the two groups of cats. In the second generation, the teeth of the cats on the bad diet started to come in an interesting way. They started to come in, differently and not fit as well together, and their health wasn't as good. Third generation, they couldn't really reproduce. Their teeth were coming in every which angle. They hated each other and often displayed signs of like pretty severe mental illness, or what would be mental illness in a human, and they didn't reproduce. So there was no fourth generation with those Pottinger's cats. So it has literally been about 3 or 4 generations since mass processed foods were introduced. So that becomes an issue. And it coincides well with Dr. Carroll's observations. And the last one, which is a very interesting one, and one that I'm very fond of myself, and the subject of this talk, which is blockages to healing. So there's several kinds of blockages to healing. We're going to get into those. So blockages to healing, in European medicine, their term focuses, or if you're talking about more than one, foci, or foci, I say foci, is a very interesting thing. It's not like you can get a dead body and like chop it up and like, oh, there's a focus, there's a focus, there's a focus. They are much more functional than anatomical. It's not like a little lesion of tuberculosis in the lungs or something that anyone can see. A focus is anything which can stop the body from healing itself. It's anything which destroys the body's innate unity and innate ability to regulate. This is a very useful definition in holistic medicine, but with such a broad definition, it means a large variety of things can become focuses, and addressing them becomes quite problematic. 4 big categories of them: scars, infections, dental issues, and emotions, and I'll go into each. So, history of the focus. This is actually a relatively old concept in medicine, and kind of enjoyed a quiet period in 20th century medicine, at least in North America. In Europe, it's still quite a thing, and it's been around for a few centuries as well. Benjamin Rush actually was known to recommend, for instance, for chronic cases of pain, he would extract teeth and often get resolution of things like arthritis and so forth. Now, quite often, there's a couple of cases where basically the patient had all of their teeth taken out and it didn't get any better, which which is one of the main issues that we'll discuss later. Is figuring out what is a focus and what is not. You can't just surgically remove every tooth a person has because they may have a focus. But its most recent kind of apogee is been under the Huneke brothers in Germany. So they lived early in the 20th century, and they began injecting scars and other tissues with anesthetics. And they found when they did that, quite often healing would occur. So one patient in particular, she had chronic pain. They injected every scar in her body, couldn't find anything, but a scar on her leg started hurting once they'd done that. So they injected that scar, and literally her chronic pain vanished within 5-10 seconds. In German, it's called Sekundenphänomen, or the second phenomenon, instant resolution of a chronic long-term problem. That is, I think, pretty awesome. That is an excellent thing. That scar on her leg, which she later disclosed was an osteomyelitis scar when she was younger, was holding up her entire body and stopping her from healing, particularly the shoulder pain. Get rid of the scar, bing, bang, boom, body's taking care of it. So if you're particularly curious about a more scholarly treatment of this topic, I would advise the book at the bottom, Radical Medicine by Louisa Williams. You can just Google radical medicine, you'll come it up. It's not an expensive book, and it's very readable, and it has an excellent historical description of this part of medicine. Highly recommend that book. So, what makes something a focus? So, not every scar becomes a focus. Not every tooth that you have a filling on or a root canal on becomes a focus. Why do some things become focuses and some things don't? Essentially, focuses are very isolated areas from the body. They're things that the body is not capable of dealing with right at that moment because it has quite a few other demands. So it essentially isolates that area, be it a tooth or a scar or anything, and leaves it to its own devices while it's tending to whatever else. This isolation uses a certain, what we might call, your body has a limited store of vitality, and to keep something isolated as a focus uses up a limited store of that vitality. So that vitality is then unavailable for other things, like healing. That's pretty much the long and the short of it. One focus is bad enough, but I've done people who I've been able to identify 15 on. So the more of these focuses you have and the worse they are, the less your body has the ability to heal. So focuses do tend to occur in people who are very ill, who have other things ongoing, or particularly during times of traumatic or during times of trauma. So that's generally what makes focuses. A focus and not just a normal scar that doesn't do anything. So body focuses are the first category we're going to discuss. These tend to be scars and injuries that have never healed, things that happen during periods of trauma or physiological stress that the body wasn't able to resolve. They also can be areas of chronic inflammation. The hips. If someone's got arthritis in the hips, that's a very common one. Or an old uninjured area, like for instance a bone that never really knitted properly when you broke it when you were a child. I also find digestive infections are very common focuses as well. So things like in naturopathic medicine, what we call dysbiosis, what we call just poor bacteria growing through the or bad bacteria going through the digestive tract that aren't in harmony with your body. Poor flora in the digestive tract. Again, that's another big topic. Perhaps I should do a video on that. But yeah. So the treatment for these, generally, once we've diagnosed them, and we'll discuss diagnosis later, is auricular acupuncture, ear acupuncture. If it's a digestive infection, we're going to use digestive support. And quite often, if it's a scar or something, we'll get you to locally massage it or treat it. And we may as well do neural therapy, so the injection of anesthetic into these areas. Next category are dental focus. These are interesting because they are more burdensome generally than the body focuses. Teeth have a bit of an immunological privilege status in the body, meaning your immune system isn't quite as active in them as it is in, say, your muscles or your respiratory tract or something like that. And in addition to dental work, and adding in dental work, for instance, a root canal, often makes the body even less able to patrol and heal them. These dental focuses tend to be either active, like immediate, or long-term chronic infections. The body or the teeth and the jaws are actually interesting in that the immune system very rarely, you can have very severe infections in this area without even having any symptoms. There have been cases of frank osteomyelitis, which is infection of the bone in the jaw. Person had not a sign or symptom. It's discovered accidentally on an X-ray or something like that. So these tend to be a bit more severe than the ones in the body. Treatment of these is mainly acupuncture, and if particularly auricular, but also some body. And if the teeth don't respond, then I will refer to a holistic dentist who will go and take a look at that and see what we can do or see what can be done for them. Sometimes, a root canal needs to be changed, or sometimes it needs to be taken out, or sometimes even frank cavitation surgery, which is taking a tooth and the ligaments and a bone and a piece of the jaw that's been infected needs to be done. I'm a naturopathic doctor. I don't do this. I refer to people who are experts in doing this to get that done. Interestingly, dental focuses tend to reduce, so we have a grading system for grading the severity of focus of a foci. So treating a dental foci tends to actually result in the body foci becoming less in our grading system. So this suggests kind of a tier above the body, and that these ones have a greater impact on health. So I just found that quite interesting, that you can reduce your body foci quite a bit by treating the dental ones. Along that note, a third level of focuses has been discovered really within the last couple of months. I learned about it at a course I took with David Maybe. So David, if you're watching this, thank you. I very much appreciate you showing me this. It does seem to be indeed also another entirely different level of blockages related to emotional trauma, and their treatment decreases both dental and body foci. So by treating these emotional blockages, we can actually get better, and we can both free up more of the body's vitality and reduce the rest of the focal burden in the body, as it were. So now the key issue, okay, I've discussed what kinds of focuses we have, and how we treat them and so forth. Treating focus is actually not that difficult if you know what is a focus and what is not. Diagnosis is the key issue with this therapy and the key issue in this field. The Huneke brothers and many others would simply inject every scar and see what happens. This has a number of issues. For instance, toxicity of the anesthetics. It's very costly, and you're never really quite sure if a focus has resolved or not. Something might be a focus and it might not give an immediate secundin phenomenon, which is quite rare. If you don't, how do you know you don't need to inject it 3 more times? How do you know if you've injected it 4 times, but it needs to be injected 5 or something like that? We never quite knew when something was completely resolved aside from symptoms. So this was a problem with focus therapy for a long time. I mean, I told that story about Dr. Rush, who took out every tooth in a woman's mouth and still didn't find which one was really causing her arthritis. So later on, this problem has been largely solved by a man, Frank Bahr, who was a student of Paul Noget, the originator of auriculotherapy and auricular medicine, and he developed his diagnostic methods, which I think are Bahr discovered a set of 6 points on the ear, which give a positive pulse response when poked in people with focuses. A positive pulse response. If you're one of my patients, probably done this on you. Basically, the pulse will change in quality if you poke this point on the ear. There's a bit of a hardening of the pulse. It's difficult to describe over the internet, so I can only give you those words. I could show you in person really easily, but fortunately we don't have virtual reality or anything like that just yet. So interestingly, and this is the really critical point, each pulse point only gives a response with foci of a certain severity. So for instance, and so we'll just get into that. There's a thing. So for instance, here are the points in, I won't give you a map, but here are the points. And for instance, a monoamine oxidase point is the most severe kind. Only if you poke that, but a person only has a very weak focus, let's say a ginseng focus, you won't get a positive response. But if you poke a ginseng point, but the person only has a monoamine oxidase point, you won't get a positive response. Poking each of these points gave very much specific information as to whether a person had a focus of a given severity, which was such a huge advance. It was just so incredibly useful to be able to say, okay, this person has these kinds of foci or this severity of foci, and we can track treatment. this would have been a brilliant advance all by itself. It would have immensely helped the practice of focal therapy. It doesn't stop here, however. Bahr discovered a substance which had a particular resonance with each of those spots, and thereby each of those focuses of that severity. By using these substances, he was able to evoke a VAS, a vascular autonomic signal, that change in pulse quality, when he passed over the area on the ear that had that, or that corresponded to the part of the body with the focus. So basically, he would run it over a person's ear, and he would get like a pulse change when he ran it over the vial of the substance over the area with that the area of the or the ear that corresponded to the area of the body that had that. So he was actually able to not only determine whether or not there was a focus of a particular severity, he was able to determine where it was with quite a lot of exactitude. So if you don't remember, this is a basic map of the ear on of the points on the map of the body on the ear. There is a map of your body on your ear, and we can do there are in addition to just physical locations for various organs, there are a lot of functional points as well. So by doing this, we can actually determine quite easily where those focuses are. And in addition to that, you can treat focuses with auricular therapy. So this method found you a very good point to treat that particular focus on and give you information on how severe it was and where it was. It's just brilliant. Like, it's such a big advance in the history. So Bahr originally discovered these things with with the body acupuncture, or the body focuses, I should say. Sorry. Over time, him and his student Beata Strittmatter discovered the hidden system of dental focuses in response to a couple of cases that they cleared all the focuses, but the patient still wasn't responding. So they're like, "Hey, what's going on here?" Experimented, came up with this, and recently, David Mabey has encountered he's discovered this emotional system, which I've begun working with, and I'm quite liking. So these separate systems were highlighted in the body through the use of a specific laser frequency, and I bought this laser because I wanted to do this work so much. So you're wanting to come in and get this diagnosis, it's pretty, I've got that equipment to make it work. This raises the question, however, of how many tiers there are. We know of 3. Who's to say there aren't more? Who's to say there aren't miasmatic focuses or more etheric or spiritual level ones that eat up even more of our time and energy and so forth? I can't say this. I can't say that there aren't these things right now. But we do know that these ones are here, and we can get considerable progress with them. So they're what I work now, and gradually I may do some experimentation on my own and figure out what's going where. So treatment. Treatment's the easy part of focus therapy. Once you know what is a focus, treatment is pretty simple. You can do ear acupuncture, you can do body acupuncture, you can do local massage, neural therapy, which is the injection of anesthetics, which just tends to repolarize the nerves and make the body responsive to things again. Treatments are generally once per week, and they usually are 15 to 30 minutes, depending on what a person's particular needs are. Reassessments take about 30 minutes, and I usually do them every month or two and just do treatment once a week between them. So yeah, so reassessments are $90 in my own practice. Reassessments are $90. Treatments are usually, if we're doing half an hour, it's $80, and if we're doing 15 minutes, it's $45. So just to make the price clear. Results. Usually my results are quite good. Healing focuses generally doesn't stop all the person's symptoms, but they do often feel quite a bit better. You will often, especially if we're right, on point, as my mom likes to say, people will start to feel different. They'll start to feel like happy and like less heavy in their life. They'll start to feel more energy. and their responsiveness to other therapies we're doing will improve. So I'm just about to make another video on kind of my style of practice now. So their responsiveness to hydrotherapy, to herbs, to homeopathy, to um, auriculotherapy, to the rest of their body, to body acupuncture, to everything else will get a lot better, and they'll get much more therapeutically out of those systems. So basically, this is kind of a supportive therapy to make sure that people are able to respond to the things that I was already doing, as we discussed in the beginning. So that's pretty much it. If you've got any questions for me, feel free to type them in the comment box, or feel free to contact me personally. There's my email address. It's drpalterio.nd@gmail.com. And it's funny, I've seen people talking about me, and they like say my name Thoralt or Thoreau. It's Terrio, not any of those ones. I mean, imagine like Ontario. You say it the exact same way. So just to make that clear. So my website is drpalterio.com. That is my telephone number for my clinic is 403 276 8800, and my address is 1302 Edmonton Trail Northeast. And I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I look forward to seeing any of you and hearing from you guys. So if you have an idea about a presentation that you'd like me to do, please do give me a call or give me an email, and I will do it. May not be able to do it right away because I'm quite busy, but I will do my best to get that done. And I'm hoping to come out with a couple more in the next few months. So hope you all stay tuned, and take care of yourselves. All right, bye.